RBI Governor Shaktikanta making important announcements. The central bank has again decided to keep the repo rate unchanged at 6.5%. My colleague Sakshi Bajaj is also joining me for more details and throwing light on how important it is. Sakshi, take us through the key highlights of the address.
Well, absolutely. This was, of course, the first RBI monetary policy right after the Union Budget 2024-25. And important to keep in mind, the first RBI meeting and policy announcement right after US Fed's indication of a rate cut in September. So very, very crucial to eye there. Of course, RBI Governor very clearly highlighting the fact that, look, inflation concerns remain, and therefore there was a call to remain status quo and keep rates unchanged, keep the repo rate unchanged, which essentially means for our viewers to understand that your monthly EMIs don't reduce just yet, they remain the same. So a very clear status quo announcement there. The RBI governor also stating the fact that, look, growth remains resilient, and therefore this gives them the window to focus on inflation primarily. And lastly, the third takeaway at the moment from RBI governor's announcement so far is the fact that, look, geopolitical concerns remain, and the spotlight will remain closely on what's happening in the world around us.
Sakshi, the repo rate has not been changed since last 18 months, and now they are saying that it is to be done to keep the price stability in mind. How important do you think it is right now, the focus on Vikas and the keeping in mind the price stability in the market?
Well, absolutely. If inflation concerns remain, and as we've seen due to the weather and the supply constraints, we have seen vegetable prices and food inflation really rising. And therefore, the RBI governor very clearly stating that, look, at the moment, the focus is on inflation, and therefore a rate cut has not been announced. Very clearly saying that, look, growth remains resilient for the economy, and therefore the medium term to the long term outlook will be looked at in line with all these developments. Remember, inflation and growth have to go hand in hand for an economy to prosper, and India's growth at the moment remains resilient. But in the face of geopolitical concerns, as we see around us at the moment, we have seen investors, remember, brace for US recession fears. We have seen tensions in West Asia, which NDTV has constantly been reporting. So in the face of all these geopolitical crises at the moment, as well as weather woes at large, the RBI governor stating that at the moment a status quo decision has been taken.
Right. Thank you so much, Sakshi, for joining us and giving us those details. That was RBI Governor Shaktikanta announcing that the repo rate remains unchanged at 6.5%. This has not been changed since last 18 months, viewers. And RBI Governor says that they are committed to keep price stability to ensure growth. Inflation increased to 5.1% in June is also primarily driven by food component. Sakshi, if you can also throw some light on the domestic growth that has been underlined by RBI Governor.
That's right. Well, we have been reporting how growth projections have been upbeat for the Indian economy. Global brokerages alike have been painting an upbeat and an optimistic picture. We have seen the RBI governor also very clearly stating the fact that, look, growth remains resilient, and therefore right now the focus is on inflation concerns very, very clearly. Remember, like you mentioned, food inflation has been on a high. We saw retail inflation also touch a 4-month high in June. And therefore, while headline inflation and, very clearly the RBI governor saying that it remains broadly under the declining trajectory, it is still a wait-and-watch mode. Weather concerns and supply constraints, remember, always impact food prices. It is a seasonal uptick and a structural uptick at large, and therefore RBI governor very clearly saying the spotlight remains on that.
Right, and resilient and steady growth do put in a positive impact on India's economy and enables an MPC to focus on its target as well. Sakshi, if you can underline about the global conditions that the RBI governor talked about.
That's right. Well, Aditi, the RBI governor very clearly mentioning, the global conditions at the moment. The world we live in is full of uncertainty. We have been reporting geopolitical concerns and tensions in the Middle East, as well as, the US recession fears really sparking. UK protests is also something NDTV has been covering very, very clearly. So really the world at large remains very uncertain at the moment. Needless to mention the Bangladesh crisis unfolding as well. So RBI governor saying that, look, with what's happening around the world at the moment, a cautious approach has been taken, and therefore at the moment, repo rates remain unchanged, which for our viewers to understand time and again means your monthly EMIs, your monthly cost remains the same at the moment, doesn't come down at the moment.
Right. Sakshi, we are also being joined by our colleague from NDTV Profit. Hi, Harsh. If you can throw some light on the key announcements that were made by the RBI Governor.
Well, my key takeaways from this, of course, policy announcements still happening. But my key takeaway is that there's a slow and gradual shift in terms of the consensus on whether rates should be cut or not. Because what we've seen in the last policy, 5:1, was the kind of vote in favor of maintaining policy stance at 6.5% as maintaining policy stance of withdrawal of accommodation as well as the 6.5% repo. This time around, that has switched. 4:2 is now the ratio. And that gradual shift signifies that likely we are about to turn a corner in terms of rates. Maybe next policy or the policy after that could well be the policy where rates come off. Of course, while the governor himself spoke about how growth in the services sector has been very, very strong, he's also spoken about inflation, and he's waiting for inflation to fall more towards that 4% number. And that, I think, will be the key thrust factor which he will be looking for. That will give the RBI a lot of more confidence if that were to happen, to actually cut rates.